Again, my name is Scott Mizek, application engineer, and today we're going to talk about corridors using conditional subassemblies and assemblies. Before we start, I have a couple poll questions for you. First one's pretty straightforward. Are you using targeting in your corridor? Simple one, yes or no, just to see where everyone's sitting at with the use of corridors. So, looks like for the most part, most of the people, 4/5, a little bit more than that, are using some form of targeting with their corridors. So, well, looks like we finished at just over 3/4. And then my next poll question is, what type of conditional subassemblies are you actually using in your corridors? I'm just using horizontal conditionals, I'm using cut-fill conditionals, I'm using both, or I'm using neither. Looks like we got a good mix going on right now. Looks like half of everyone is using both, which is always a good thing. So hopefully I'll be able to show you something new, something that you didn't realize before. But for everyone that is either neither or only using one, you guys should be able to get even more out of this, because you'll be able to see the benefit of a cut-fill conditional or a horizontal conditional or both. So I'm not going to bore you with a PowerPoint this time. It's a really quick PowerPoint presentation. I'm going to talk about basically 4 things today. Horizontal targeting, conditional horizontal, conditional cut fills, and then the ability to use multiple cut fill subassemblies or even multiple horizontal targets. So with that, I will actually jump into the software. And so my first example I wanted to do is using a conditional subassembly at an intersection. So what I have is I built a corridor. I have a profile, proposed profile. I have a very simple road, sidewalk, with inside and outside boulevard, or if you're in Wisconsin, a terrace. And it runs through 2 intersections. Well, obviously, I don't want to have sidewalk at the intersection. So what I can do is I can create polylines or targets at my intersections. Oops. Let me turn on 2 layers. So what I did was I have polylines that go from the PC to the PC on both sides of the road at both locations. And what I want to do is I want to build a conditional that will drop my curb and everything outside of the curb, that will it'll drop it in everything from the edge of travelway outside. It'll just drop it. So here's my basic subassembly. So what I'm going to do is I'll just quick copy it. I'll just drop a new one down. I'll rename it to. What I'm going to do is I'm going to eliminate the curb and then the sidewalk on one side. Now what I want to do is I want to come into my conditionals, and I want to do conditional horizontal target. Switch it to left. Because I'm using the crown lane, it won't recognize it. It thinks it is on the right-hand side. So I need to tell it right off the get-go that it is on the left. And you'll see that this came in with target found. Well, if it's found, then there's got to be a not found. So I'll switch to not found, and I will add another one in there. Do I need a not found for every found? No. You can get away with only having a found, but it's definitely beneficial to have one in there, just for the sake of what happens if you don't find any polylines. It won't build anything. So I have target not found, target found. Going to go into the subassembly properties on this, and what I like on this is I can change the layout width and the slope grade. Both those are for aesthetics only. It doesn't mean much, but I can actually have multiple founds in one line in here. I can have multiple distances in here. And that's what I see here is I actually see the max distance right in here. So I have the ability to say, hey, if I find this line, but within the first 200 feet, just in case my corridor may loop back on itself, I don't want it to find it 10,000 feet down the road. But what I like to do is I like to rename my targets, and I'm going to put this as left NF for not found. Say OK, and change this one to left found. Now that I have this, what I want to do is I want to come in and I want to put my curb and sidewalk when it doesn't find that polyline. Because when it does find the polyline, I want it to drop it. So just by clicking that right there, my subassembly or my assembly is done on the left-hand side. Now I'll delete the right-hand side. And I'll just quickly come back in and then mirror everything over to the right-hand side. So now I have my duplicate. Quickly change this to be right not found. And right found. So here's my corridor. It was originally being used with basic assembly. Now I want to change my corridor to use the assembly 2 that I just built right there. So I'm going to come into my properties, parameters, basic assembly, basic 2. Say apply, say OK, rebuild. Nothing happened. Why didn't anything happen? Well, I got targets. I got to adjust my targets. I actually have to put them in there. So let's jump back into corridor properties, set all targets. This is why I actually used that N, F, and then the F. So I actually see right not found, left not found. If I would have just left this as not found, it's hard to tell what side of the road I'm actually looking at. Was I on the left-hand side? Was I on the right-hand side? By being able to see this, it makes it a little bit easier for me to decipher what I need to target. So I see I have my right not found and my right found. So I need to target these things. And when I come in and set my targets, as most of you may know, who have, because 75% have used some form of targeting, I can target. And I can target a feature line, a survey figure, or a polyline. Not a line. So always make sure that when you do this, make polylines. I'm trying to convince myself or force myself to never use the line command again in Civil. Everything that I try to do now is always a polyline. But not only can I do those 3, but I can also do an alignment. Well, I'm going to leave it as polylines because that's what I drew. A trick that you may not know is select from drawing. And what I did was by select from drawing, I have to come in and manually pick. Well, I can see that my corridor, in this case, goes from the top to the bottom. So the right-hand side, in this case, is actually on the left of the screen. So if I click on my, right, let me escape out. Let me get my corridor to the back. Display order, send to back. Now I can pick it. Jump back into corridor properties, set targets, right not found, select from drawing. I can come in and pick that one, and then come down and pick this one. Well, if it's only two, it's not that bad. It's pretty simple. But if I'm dealing with a residential road that extends 2 miles and it's got 75 driveways on one side, 75 on another, or it's a 2-mile road and it goes through 15 intersections, you don't want to go and manually click all 15. That's where the select by layer comes into play. And what I did was I actually went through and I purposely labeled those polylines and I put them on intersection left and intersection right. So I can come in and just manually pick intersection right and say, okay, and it's going to take all 3 polylines, feature lines, or survey figures that are on that particular layer. Say okay. And I'm done with it not found. I'll go with found, select by layer, pick the right side again. This also comes into play when, in the case of my example, is my alignment runs north to south, so the right-hand side is really on the left-hand side of the screen. Well, you never know. It may confuse someone up and says, oh, I need to pick the ones on the left-hand side. And as you can see, it is much quicker. Left found, I'm going to hit found and say okay. Left. Say okay. Say okay. Say okay. Rebuild. And that quickly, it found my polyline and it dropped everything outside of the edge of travelway where that polyline existed. So now I have the ability, I have my intersection, my through intersection, and now I can build my other corridor running east-west, and I can then tie into this corridor here. A little bit simpler. I don't want to say it's simpler than the intersection wizard, but it's, if you have to build your intersection manually, I typically take the primary road, drop my curb like I did here, and then tie in the existing, or tie in the secondary corridor into here. And for those of you who don't know, if I extract a feature line out of this corridor, I can use it as a feature line to target on this one. The only thing you have to do is you have to make sure that your corridors are separate and not just 2 baselines within one corridor. So that's the first one of tying in using a conditional horizontal target for an intersection. One the things that when I train, I love showing. People get a lot of use out of it, and they said, oh, I could have designed my intersection a little bit differently. So next one I want to show is driveways. So I'm going to jump to this drawing. And what I have is I have a corridor built, and it's using the basic lane, basic curb, nothing behind it for right now. But I have driveways, and I have 3 driveways on the right, 3 on the left. And what I want to do is I want to have full curb on both sides when I don't have a driveway. And when I hit a driveway, which represents the lines, I want it to be surmountable curb. So I'm going to take my basic assembly here, and I'm going to add on to it. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to delete out one of the curbs, and I'm going to put in target found, Switch it to not found. Rename driveway right. Right, not found. In this case, I'm using driveway in there because you can have a conditional after a conditional after a conditional. So this case, I want it to be known that I'm talking about the driveway. Is there curb or isn't there curb? But I still distinguish between just driveway and then driveway not found. So now what I want is, if it's not found, if it doesn't find that line, I want full curb. So I'm going to come in and put in full curb. I'm going to mirror it over and drop it in there. Now, if it does find curb, I want surmountable curb. So I'll just go ahead and use this urban curb and gutter one. And I now have urban curb and gutter. And because I want to be able to see the difference between the two, because right now they're pretty much the same width, so it might be a little bit harder to see. But if I come in and if I add, I usually just come in and add a basic lane, and I will add a 12-foot basic lane right back in here, which will represent the apron, and then if there's a sidewalk in there. And I'm going to go from -2% to 2%. So now when I build this, you'll be able to see it. Delete out that. And if you didn't know already from watching or knowing ahead of time, it's still sometimes quicker to actually build one side of the road and then mirror it over, especially when you're talking about conditionals. It can be a little bit time consuming to try to build each side individually. So left, change this one to left, subassembly properties. Whoops. Confirm CTC Avenue 1. Look at our corridor. Make sure that I'm pointing to CTC Avenue 1. I am. Prospector, corridor, rebuild. And of course, it didn't rebuild, or it rebuilt, but everything looks the same, and that's because targets. Come up, corridor properties, set all targets. Here's my driveways right, here's my driveway lefts. So right, I'm going to select by layer again, and I'm going to take driveway right, oops, not turn lane. Say okay, say okay. And another thing that I didn't really mention, but I'm mentioning it now, if you notice that for the found and the not found, I've always targeted the same polylines. For this simple situation, yes, everything that's found should also be not found. So if I find polyline 9, 10, or 11, if I find it, put in surmountable curb and then put in that driveway behind it. But if, excuse me, if I don't find polylines 9, 10, or 11, then I want full curb. So your targeting should have the same targets, whether it's found or not found. You can make a more complex subassembly by actually saying that, hey, if you find these 3 lines, do this. But if you find these 3 lines, then do this. But if you don't find any of these lines, then actually do this. So you could get away and make a really complex assembly using multiple conditionals. So I'm going to quickly finish up the driveway lefts here. Whoops. Okay, left. It's okay. It's okay. A. I see my corridors are coming out to here. Take a peek at it in Object Viewer. Try not to. And so my generic lane assembly didn't have anything connecting in between, but you can see that it came out at each driveway, at each endpoint. Now you can see I have some circles in here, and that's for my frequency. What I did was I actually put a 1 foot radius circle at the end of each line for an extra frequency line. Because what I want to do is edit frequency, pick the region, and what I could do is I could just add a new region and then actually snap to the intersection of the circle and the edge of travelway. And that way my curb will transition over 1 foot from full surmountable to full curb. So from full down to zero curb. Now in 2015, if you didn't know this, there is the offset target right in here, and it says at offset target geometry points. That is our offset lines right here. So what this is going to do is it will put a frequency line at the endpoint of each line. The adjacent to offset target start end, what that does is it puts another frequency line 2/100ths to the outside of my polylines. What that means for me is my curb will actually transition from zero curb to full curb over 2/100ths. And so is that going to last? Probably not. Is that the way it's done in the field? Definitely not. I have talked to Autodesk, a little bit over a year ago, and looked into having that parameter put in here to actually say, hey, put a frequency line in a foot, 6 inches, 3 feet. So you can define where that is set at. Right now, because I had this set to yes and yes, it put another frequency line in 2/100ths outside. So that's why this thing came from here and then dropped straight down to the back. If I would have set this to no, it would have actually transitioned from this corner to this corner right here, because that was my next frequency line. Well, that was close. I mean, it was under a foot, but what would have happened if I would have, with my frequency line in tangent being 25 feet, I would actually run the risk of being 24 feet away. Now, are we going to transition zero to full curb over 24 feet? Definitely not. So, this is a new feature in 15, if you didn't know it. If you're running 14 or earlier, here's a nice feature. If you do a lot of corridor targeting, it would be worth upgrading to 15 then, because it's definitely a time saver. Because right now, I have 7 driveways. I would have to pick 14 circles manually. It takes time. This kind of does it for me. So those are my driveways coming in, and you can see everything turned out really nice. I got a green line up in here, represents a turn lane. This isn't a conditional, but it's a horizontal targeting, just in case someone has never used a horizontal target before. I'm going to go back into corridor properties, set all target, and I'm going to look, and I have a left width and a right width lane. Well, in this case, I know my corridor actually in this one runs south to north, so I want to target the width of my right lane. I'm going to come in, select by layer, and I actually have a turn lane, one in there. Say OK. Say OK. And what this did right here is it's going to target that lane for horizontal but not vertical. So it will maintain whatever slope I specified in my assembly. So I'll say OK. Oops, long OK. Say OK. And that quickly I made a turn lane. No longer are the days of needing an assembly of 12-foot lanes and then another assembly of 14-foot or 24-foot lanes combined, and then trying to put in frequency lines to where it transitions from a single lane to a double lane. No longer are the days of needing a subassembly that shows full curb here, but full on the left, surmountable on the right, and then right here I need surmountable left and right. Here I need surmountable left, full on right. And so, I mean, with the conditional, I was able to do this with one region. Without the conditional, it would have been a region for up in here, another region for this driveway, another region for where they overlap, another region here, region. So we're looking at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. I'd be looking at 15 regions without conditionals to go from full curb to surmountable curb. Hey, I love corridors that have one region. 15 can be hard to maintain and kept track of. One's definitely much better, in my opinion. Got one question in really quick. I'll answer it right away. Can you make the 2 sample drawing files you are showing us available today? Yep, anyone that wants it, I can email it off. I can email these drawings to you. Not a big deal. Another question is, can you show me one that has a corner intersection with different parking stripe widths? One is a 6-foot and the other is a 10-foot. With conditionals, that would be a horizontal target, and what I would do is I would just come in and I would target one line that's 6 foot away, and then when the parking widths become 10 foot, I would then target a 10-foot line, and if it transitions from the 6 to the 10, then just go ahead and just draw your polyline in that transition area. So that would just be kind of like what I did with my turn lane right there. I had here, I had a 12-foot, if you want to call it, parking stripe width, and up in here I had a 24-foot parking stripe width, and then I just had a line that connected the two. So it always targeted. So that would be a way to do the parking width, or parking stripe width. I just did it as a turn lane. One other question, is there a way to quickly update targets per layer when new targets are added? Currently, it appears it is going to each target conditional and reselect. Yes, right now, there is no quicker way to add targets or to switch targets. CTC does have a tool right in here. I'll show it now. We actually have a corridor cleanup tool that I can come in and click my corridor, and say OK. And now what that did was that actually, if I go into my, removed all my targets. I actually had to do this morning. I was just playing around too much, had different polylines here and there. Excuse me. And I just said, you know, I'm going to start all over. I removed all my targets, and then I started over. In 15, they have made it that if I replace a subassembly that has target offset as its definition, anything that was in there before, so if I went with a generic pavement structure and I replace that with a basic lane, because those two share target offsets, if I had a target assigned to the original, it would maintain the target to the one I replaced it with. So kind of like swapping parts with the pipe networks, it gave me the ability to actually flop out subassemblies, but maintain the targeting. But right now, using layers is kind of the best way to do mass targeting at once. But it is still coming in and manually going to the found and the not found and manually picking each one individually, whether it's using the layer or selecting from the drawing. There isn't a quicker way. I was hoping that there would be the ability to maybe just right click and copy and then paste it into here. But right now, I haven't found any quicker ways. So I'm just going to put my driveways back in. Just on the right-hand side. Don't need to see them on both sides. It's okay. Okay. So there's my driveways. They're back in there again. Pretty basic conditional. It was, hey, if you find one thing, do this. If you don't find it, then do this. Nothing that's overcomplicating, but it's still, like I said, 15 regions versus 1. This right here, time saver. I'm going to jump to another drawing where I already have the same lanes already built, but I want to put in where I have full curb, I want to put in cut fills. So what I want to do is I want to come in and I want to put in a conditional subassembly for cut fills. And I'm going to make this one a little more advanced. I'm going to go right-hand side, and I'm going to say cut at a 1-to-1, and I'm going to drop it in here. I'm going to come back in and now make this a 2-to-1 cut, but I want it to only be from 0 to 4 feet. I'm going to change this to fill, and I'm going to put this fill in there. And now I'm going to go from 4 feet to 9, whoops, clicking there, 999, almost 10,000 feet. And change the slope. Again, the slope is nothing more but aesthetics. So I can come in and try that again. Fill. Right-hand side, 1-to-1. There we go. Now I'll quickly change this one. Parameters. This one is going to go from 4. Went too quick. My apologies on that one. 4 feet. Apply. So now what I have is I have the ability to say that, hey, if I'm in a fill situation, do this. Less than 4 feet. If I'm more than 4 feet, I want to do different. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, I always like generic, daylight to surface or link slope to surface. And if I'm in a small fill, You know what? I'm going to come in and put in a 3-to-1 or 33%. Oops. 33%. Don't put in 0.33. Tab. And I want to put that right there. But you know what? If I'm in a steeper fill, you know what? I need to, because I got to be within my right-of-way line. You know what? I can't be 3-to-1. I got to be 1.5-to-1 or 1-to-1. So I'm going to come in and put in 66%. And I'm going to drop that in right there. So now if I'm in a steeper fill, I'm going to, or if I'm in a higher fill, my grade's going to be steeper, a little bit more shallow. Now, if I'm in a cut, let's actually just use, if I'm in a cut, I'll just copy, and I'll use that one in there. So I'll use the same 3-to-1, whether I'm in a cut or fill, as long as I'm less than 4 feet. But now I'm in a cut of greater than 4 feet. Let's put in a retaining wall, and let's put in a, let's just use that one. Put in a retaining wall there. Let's adjust some parameters on there. Top height, let's make it, well, I know I'm at least 4-foot cut, so let's go ahead and let's make it 6 feet. Say apply, say OK. And now from there, I can come in and I could copy, run the whole scenario all over again, and then just copy. Should have copied those right from the get-go. Whoops. We'll eliminate those, and I will just move this one up to the top. And now, because this overlaps a little bit, maybe I want to come in and change this parameter. Instead of a 2-to-1, I'll make it a 4-to-1, just to make it a little bit more useful. So here's using horizontal conditionals and then using cut fill conditionals right behind it. Hey, if I'm in a steep cut, put in a wall. I could have put, if I'm in a steep fill, put in the opposite wall. But here's a nice simple cut fill, less than 4 feet. Just do a standard 3-to-1 daylighting. Come in, mirror. There's my nice new subassembly. And this is assembly Avenue 1. Let me check, make sure that my corridor is set up to rebuild automatically. And then check my corridor, make sure that I am using CTC Avenue 1. Say OK, REA. And take a peek at this and find out why I do not have anything out there. Good possibility that I broke my association with this link right in here. Well, I know it works there, so that should have all built. Let me come in and just change my properties to Avenue 2, say OK, apply, OK, rebuild, REA. I have to look into this, why it's not rebuilding for me. I did have, oh, yeah. Once again, set your targets. My fault. I was thinking ahead, but yep, set your targets. Here's the problem that I have, that I didn't rename any of my targets. And what I have is conditional cut or fill, cut or fill, cut or fill, cut or fill. Well, what one is that for? Is it on the right-hand side? Is it on the left-hand side? Is this the possibility of what do I want to say? Right-hand side, left-hand side, the height. I'll come in and I'll set EG to all. So there's the EGs, there's my driveway rights, and do I have my driveway lefts in here? I do not have driveway lefts in here. Well, I have no's. We'll just say okay. We'll say okay. Now we'll rebuild. Darn targets. I was just trying to get ahead of myself. But I can see where I'm in cuts and where I'm in fills, it would come in. And I believe I built this object viewer. We'll try not to crash the software here. I promise nothing. One more time. I can see here I had just a standard fill or cut, and I can see right here, get this over, there's my wall. So at this point right here, I exceeded the 4-foot cut. So it started putting in a retaining wall. Here, I was at 3.95 feet cut. So it did not put that in. But it gave me the ability to put in a retaining wall whether or not I needed one. So quick design.